I was halfway through installing my gate when she showed up, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, and that kind of smile that doesn't mean anything good. "You can't block this road," she said, not even introducing herself. "It belongs to the HOA. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I thought she was joking. This road? This narrow strip of gravel cutting through my land? I had just paid 6 figures for this property 3 months ago, and not once in any document, in any conversation, had anyone mentioned an HOA. So I leaned on the metal post I'd just cemented into the ground, wiped the dust off my hands, and said, calm as I could, "I think you've got the wrong place." Her smile didn't move. "Oh, I don't," she said. "You're the new owner. Parcel 17B, right? Congratulations. But that road is a shared access lane. Always has been." That's when something in my gut shifted, because she said it with confidence. Not hesitation. Not a guess. Like she'd said it 100 times before. I bought this land for one reason: peace. After 10 years of working nonstop, dealing with noise, traffic, and people constantly in my space, I wanted out. I wanted quiet mornings, open land, and no one telling me what I could or couldn't do on my own property. And this place? It was perfect. 10 acres surrounded by trees, with a small gravel road leading from the main highway straight through the front portion of the land and ending near an old shed. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Or at least, I thought it was. The realtor had walked me through everything. No HOA, he said clearly. No shared restrictions. What you see is what you get. I even asked twice, because I've heard the horror stories. Hidden rules. Surprise fees. People telling you what color you can paint your fence. Not here, he assured me. And the paperwork backed it up. Clean title. No easements mentioned. No association agreements. Nothing. So when this woman stood there, acting like she owned the ground I was standing on, it didn't just confuse me. It annoyed me. About all the documents, I told her, keeping my voice steady. There's no HOA tied to this property. She sighed. Actually sighed, like I was the problem. That's because you people never read the fine print, she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. This road connects to 3 properties behind yours. It's been used for years. You can't just block it. You mean they've been using it? I replied. That doesn't make it theirs. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It's not up for debate. That's when I noticed something. She hadn't shown me a single piece of proof. No document. No map. Nothing official. Just confidence. An attitude. Behind her I saw movement. 2 neighbors stood at a distance, pretending not to watch. One leaned on his truck, arms crossed. The other had his phone out, maybe recording, maybe just waiting. That uneasy feeling in my chest grew a little stronger. This wasn't random. This had been happening long before I got here. Look, I said, trying to keep things civil. I don't know what you've been told, but I bought this land legally. If there's something official, I'm happy to look at it. Until then, I'm finishing my gate. That's when her expression changed. The fake politeness dropped. You install that gate, she said slowly, and you'll be in violation of HOA access rules. I blinked. Violation of something that doesn't exist. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into her folder, pulled out a piece of paper, and held it out toward me. Consider this your first notice. I didn't take it. First notice of what? Obstruction of shared property access, she said. $500 fine. Payable within 14 days. For a second, I thought I misheard her. A fine? She was fining me on my own land? That's when the laughter came back. But this time, it wasn't light. It was sharp, unbelieving. You're serious? Completely. I took the paper from her hand. It looked official enough, typed, formatted, even had a logo at the top. But something fell off. No government seal. No legal reference I recognized. Just a name. Oak Ridge Community HOA. I had never heard of it. Not once. You're going to want to take that down, she added, nodding toward the gate frame behind me. Or this will escalate quickly. There it was. Not a request. A threat. I looked past her again, at the neighbors, the road, the land I thought I understood. And for the first time since I moved in, it didn't feel simple anymore. It felt like I'd stepped into something that had already been in motion long before I arrived. Something quiet. Something calculated. I folded the notice in half, slipped it into my pocket, and gave her a small nod. I'll look into it. That seemed to satisfy her for now. She adjusted her sunglasses, turned without another word, and walked back down the gravel road like she owned every inch of it. The two neighbors followed shortly after, exchanging glances I couldn't quite read. And just like that, they were gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the unfinished gate. The cement around the post hadn't even dried yet. Everything had been simple this morning. Clear. Mine. Now, I wasn't so sure. I pulled the notice back out of my pocket and looked at it again. $500. For blocking access to my own property. It didn't make sense. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. And if they thought I was just going to roll over and pay, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Got it. Here's part 2, where things start escalating fast and the pressure builds back-end index pointing down. The next morning, I woke up thinking the whole thing might have just been some weird misunderstanding. Maybe she got the wrong property. Maybe there was an old agreement that got cleared before I bought the land. Either way, I figured one quick check of my documents would settle everything. I was wrong. I spread every paper from my purchase across the kitchen table. Title deed, survey map, closing documents. I went through them line by line again. Slow this time. Careful. Looking for anything I might have missed. Easement. Right of way. Shared access agreement. Anything. But it all said the same thing it said before. The land was mine. All of it. Including the road. Still, something didn't sit right. Because people don't just walk onto someone else's property and start issuing fines unless they believe they can get away with it. Which meant one of two things. Either she was completely bluffing, or this had worked on someone before. Around noon, I heard it. The low rumble of an engine coming up the gravel road. I stepped outside just in time to see a black SUV rolling straight past my unfinished gate, like it didn't even exist. No hesitation. No slowing down. Just drove right through my property. I raised a hand, signaling them to stop. They didn't. The SUV kept going, cutting across the exact path I had planned to block, until it disappeared behind the trees toward the back lots. I stood there for a second, processing what had just happened. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because now I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was routine. About 20 minutes later, the SUV came back. This time, I stepped directly into the road. The driver slowed, just enough to avoid hitting me, but didn't look happy about it. The window rolled down halfway. A man in his late 40s stared at me, like I was the inconvenience. "You mind?" he said. "Some of us actually live back here." I tilted my head slightly. "Yeah," I said. "On your own property." "Not mine." He let out a short, annoyed breath. "Here we go," he muttered. Then louder. "That road's shared. Always has been." According to who? According to everyone who's been using it for the last 15 years. I crossed my arms. That's not how ownership works. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he shook his head, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You must be new," he said. "I am," I replied. "And I like my privacy." He smirked slightly. "Then you picked the wrong place." That line stuck with me, even after he drove off, even after the dust settled, because it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a fact. An hour later, I got my second surprise. A white envelope taped to my front door. No knock. No doorbell. Just left there. Waiting. I already knew what it was before I opened it. Another notice. Same header. Oak Ridge Community HOA. But this time, it wasn't just one page. It was 3. I scanned the first line, and my jaw tightened. Final warning before escalation. Final? For what? I hadn't even responded to the first one yet. I flipped through the pages quickly. The language was more aggressive this time. More official. More confident. It listed unauthorized obstruction. Violation of shared access rights. Failure to comply with HOA regulations. And at the bottom, total amount due, $1,200. I blinked. Yesterday, it was $500. Now it was more than double. That uneasy feeling from before? It wasn't subtle anymore. It was loud. I stepped back outside, looking down the road. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. Tire tracks. Not just one or two. Dozens. Deep grooves in the gravel. Worn into the path like it had been used daily, for years. They hadn't just been occasionally using this road. They depended on it, which meant one thing. If I closed it, I wouldn't just be inconveniencing them. I'd be cutting them off. And suddenly, everything made sense. The confidence, the attitude, the pressure. They weren't asking for permission. They were trying to force control before I realized what was really happening. That evening, just before sunset, I saw her again. Same walk, same posture, same expression, like she was already expecting how this would go. She didn't wait for me to speak this time. "You got the second notice," she said. Not question, a statement. "I did," I replied. And I looked at her for a moment. Really looked this time at the way she stood. The way she held that clipboard like authority came with it. Still waiting on proof, I said calmly, "You know, something legal." Her smile came back, but it was thinner now. "You'll get all the proof you need," she said, "when this goes further." "Further where?" "Legal," she replied simply. I let out a slow breath. "Good," I said. "Let's do that." That caught her off guard, just for a second. But I saw it, because she expected resistance, not agreement. "You really want to go down that road?" she asked. I nodded slightly. "On my road," I said. "Yeah, I do." The air between us shifted. This wasn't casual anymore. This wasn't her controlling the situation. This was the moment things changed. She straightened slightly, adjusting her stance. "Then I suggest you remove that gate," she said, her tone colder now. "Because once this escalates, you're not just looking at fines." There was again that word, escalates. "Sound expensive," I said. "It will be." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind moved through the trees. The gravel crunched faintly under her shoes as she shifted her weight. Then I gave a small nod. "All right," I said. "Let escalate." That was the wrong answer, and we both knew it. She turned without another word this time. No smile, no fake politeness, just walked away. And as I watched her disappear down the road, I realized something important. This wasn't about a road anymore. This was about control. And they weren't used to being told no, but they just had been. The fines didn't stop. They multiplied. 2 days after the second notice, another envelope showed up. This time, it wasn't taped to my door. It was shoved halfway into my mailbox, bent like whoever delivered it didn't care how it looked as long as I saw it. I didn't even open it right away. I already knew what it was. When I finally did, late that night, sitting at my kitchen table, I just stared at the number. $2,400. I actually checked the pages twice to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong. But no, there was clear as day. More violations, more fees, more warnings about escalation. They weren't even pretending anymore. This wasn't about rules. This was pressure. And it wasn't just the letters. The traffic increased. A lot. Where before I'd see maybe 1 or 2 vehicles a day cutting through. Now it felt constant. Morning, afternoon, even late at night. Headlights cutting through the trees like I was living next to a highway instead of in the middle of my own land. And they weren't subtle about it either. Cars would slow down as they passed my house. People would really look like they were checking for something, or waiting for a reaction. One afternoon, I counted 7 vehicles. In less than an hour, all using the same path, all acting like it belonged to them. That's when I decided to test something. The next morning, I dragged a large stack of lumber across the road. Not permanent, not a gate, just enough to block a car. Then I waited. It didn't take long. About 15 minutes later, a pickup truck rolled up. Stopped. Idled for a second. Then the driver stepped out. He didn't knock. Didn't call out. Didn't even look around much. He just walked up to the lumber, grabbed one of the boards, and shoved it aside. Just like that. Like it was nothing. Like it was expected. I stepped out onto my porch. "Hey," my voice cut through the quiet. He turned, clearly annoyed at being interrupted. "You mind explaining what you're doing?" I asked. He shrugged, moving the blockage. "That's on my property." "So is the road," he shot back. There was again. That same confidence. That same belief. I walked a few steps closer. "No," I said calmly. "It's not." For a second, he looked like he might argue. Then he just shook his head. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he muttered. Then he got back in his truck and drove through. I stood there, watching him go. The boards still scattered across the gravel. My test had given me exactly the answer I needed. They didn't just think they had the right. They acted on it. That evening, I got another visit. This time, she didn't come alone. The HOA president, clipboard, sunglasses, perfect posture, and two others standing just behind her. One older man in a button-up shirt, and another guy I hadn't seen before, arms crossed, silent, watching everything. "This needs to stop," she said the moment I stepped outside. No greeting, no small talk. I leaned against the porch railing. "Funny," I said. I was thinking the same thing. Her jaw tightened slightly. "We've issued multiple notices," she continued. "You've ignored all of them." "I haven't ignored anything," I replied. "I've asked for proof." Still waiting. The older man stepped forward this time. "You're obstructing access to multiple properties," he said. "That's a serious issue." "So is trespassing," I shot back. The third guy shifted slightly, like he was getting impatient, but he still didn't speak. She held up another paper. "This is your final notice before legal action," she said. I didn't take it. "How many final notices do you have?" I asked. That hit a nerve. Her voice sharpened. "Enough to make this very expensive for you." I pushed off the railing and stepped closer. "Then do it," I said quietly. That stopped her. Not because she didn't hear me, but because she didn't expect me to say it. "Take it legal," I continued. "Bring whatever you've got. Because right now, all I see is paper with no authority behind it." The silence that followed was different. Heavier. The older man glanced at her. The silent guy shifted again. And for the first time since this started, I saw something crack. Not fear. Not yet. But uncertainty. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I'm the first person who didn't just roll over." That did it. Her composure slipped just a little. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said. I met her stare. "Then show me." Another pause. Longer this time. Then she lowered the paper slightly, adjusted her grip on the clipboard. And just like that, she stepped back. "Fine," she said. One word. Flat. Controlled. Then she turned. The other two followed without a word. No threats this time. No fake smiles. Just silence. And somehow, that was worse. Because it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. That night, I sat outside longer than usual, watching the road, listening to the occasional car pass through. The fines were piling up. The pressure was building. And now, they had gone quiet, which meant one thing. They were planning something. And whatever it wasn't going to be small. I looked out at the unfinished gate. The post still standing. The space still open. They thought they could push me out, wear me down, make me give in. But they didn't understand something. I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew this road was mine. And if they wanted to fight over it, they were about to get one. The silence didn't last long, but it lasted just long enough to bother me. No new letters. No surprise visits. No cars slowing down like they were trying to make a point. For 2 days, nothing. And that was the problem. Because people like that don't just stop. They regroup. So instead of waiting for the next move, I made mine. The next morning, I grabbed every document I had and drove straight into town. If there was anything real behind their claims, anything at all, it would be on record. And if it wasn't, then I know exactly what I was dealing with. The county records office sat in an older building just off the main road. Nothing fancy, just rows of desks, file cabinets, and a quiet hum of people working through paperwork that most never think about until they have to. I stepped up to the front desk. "I need to look into property records," I said, "specifically easements or shared access agreements." The clerk, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses resting low on her nose, nodded like she'd heard this 1,000 times before. "Parcel number?" I gave it to her. She typed for a moment, then glanced back up at me. "Everything tied to your property will be under that file. Give me a few minutes." I waited, leaning against the counter, replaying every conversation from the past few days in my head. The confidence, the threats, the fines. It didn't add up. "All right," she said finally, placing a stack of documents in front of me. "This is everything on record." I moved to a nearby table and started going through it. Page by page, line by line, deed history, ownership transfers, survey maps. And then, there it was, a section labeled, easements and access rights. My pulse picked up slightly as I read. This was it. The answer. I slowed down. Focused. One easement listed. Utility access. Running along the far edge of the property. Nowhere near the road. That was it. No shared road agreement. No HOA control. No mention of any community rights. Nothing. I went back through it again. Slower this time. Just to be sure. Same result. The road was mine. Fully. Legally. No gray area. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Part of me felt relieved. Validated. But another part? That part was paying attention to something else. If this was so clear, so simple, then why were they so confident? I gathered the documents and walked back to the desk. There's no shared access listed here, I said. The clerk glanced at the pages, then nodded. If it's not recorded, it's not legally enforceable, she replied. At least not through us. Not through you, I repeated. She gave a small shrug. Sometimes people have informal agreements. Old understandings between neighbors. But if it's not documented, it doesn't hold much weight legally. Old understandings. That explained the behavior. At some point years ago, someone probably allowed access. Maybe even encouraged it. And over time, it stopped being a favor and started being treated like a right. I thanked her, gathered everything, and headed back out. But I wasn't done yet. Because documents were one thing. Proof? That required something more concrete. The next stop was a surveyor. By mid-afternoon, I was standing on my land again, this time with a man who looked like he'd spent most of his life measuring things down to the inch. He walked the property slowly, checking markers, comparing maps, taking notes. I stayed quiet, let him work. After about an hour, he stopped near the road, looked down, then back up at me. You said they're claiming this is shared access? He asked. Yeah, I replied. Been using it for years. He nodded slightly, then pointed toward the ground. This entire stretch, he said, it's well inside your boundary. I felt something settle in my chest. No doubt, no confusion, just fact. Not even close, he added. If there was an easement here, it'd be marked. It's not. I looked down the road. The same gravel, the same tire marks. But now, it looked different. Not like something uncertain, like something that had been taken for granted. Can you document that? I asked. He gave a small smile. That's what I do. Good. Because if this was going where I thought it was going, I was going to need everything. That evening, I did one more thing. I installed cameras. Not hidden, not subtle, visible, strategic. One facing the road, one covering the entrance, one angled toward where the gate would be. If they wanted to keep using my land like it was theirs, I was going to have a record of every second of it. And judging by the tire tracks, they wouldn't disappoint. As the sun dipped below the trees, I stood there for a moment, looking out over everything. A few days ago, this was simple, quiet, mine. Now, it was something else entirely. A pattern, a system, something that had been running unchecked for years. Until now, I pulled out one of the HOA notices again, looked at the total. $2, $400 and counting. They thought they had leverage. They thought pressure would work. But they made one mistake. They pushed too far, before I knew the truth. And now that I did, everything changed. Because this wasn't just about defending my property anymore. It was about proving something. And maybe making sure they never tried this again. I folded the notice, slipped it back into my pocket, and looked out at the road one last time. All right, I muttered under my breath. Your move. Once you know the truth, you stop reacting, and you start planning. That was the shift. A few days ago, I was confused, trying to figure out what was real, what wasn't, wondering if I'd missed something in the paperwork. Now, I knew exactly where I stood. The road was mine, the land was mine, and everything they'd been doing, it wasn't enforcement. It was bluff backed by habit, and habits break the moment someone stops playing along. So I stopped arguing. No more back and forth. No more explaining. No more trying to convince anyone. Instead, I let them continue. The cameras went live the next morning. 3 angles, clear coverage, no blind spots. And just like I expected, they didn't slow down. By noon, I had my first recordings. A silver sedan. Drove straight through without hesitation. Didn't even glance at the house. Then a pickup. Same thing. Then another SUV. And another. By the end of the day, I had over a dozen separate clips. Different vehicles. Different drivers. All doing the same thing. Using my road like it was public. No permission. No hesitation. Just routine. I sat at my desk that night, replaying the footage. Not angry. not frustrated, focused, because every clip, it wasn't just evidence. It was a pattern, and patterns are hard to defend in court. Day 2 was even better. Around mid-morning, I caught something different. A black SUV, same one from before, but this time, it stopped, right in the middle of the road. The driver stepped out, walked up to where I'd stacked a few boards near the edge, not blocking the road, just sitting there. He looked around, clearly checking if anyone was watching. Then slowly, he kicked the board aside, not because they were in the way, but because he could. I leaned back in my chair, watching the footage again, zooming in, catching every detail. That wasn't access. That was intent. And intent? That matters. By the third day, I had hours of footage. Cars, trucks, people walking across the edge of my land like it was part of their neighborhood. Some even slowed down to look directly at the cameras. And still, they didn't stop, which told me everything I needed to know. They didn't think I'd do anything. Or worse, they thought I couldn't. That evening, just before sunset, she came back. Alone this time. No clipboard. No papers. Just that same posture. That same confidence. I stepped outside before she could even reach the porch. "You've been busy," she said, nodding toward the cameras. I followed her gaze. "Just documented my property," I replied. Her lips curved slightly. "Smart," she said. "You're going to want records of this." That caught my attention, because the way she said it, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like she thought those cameras would help her. "Something I should know?" I asked. She took a slow step closer. "You're about to make this a lot worse for yourself," she said. There was again that tone. Not loud, not aggressive. Certain. I tilted my head slightly. "Ow!" She glanced down the road briefly, then back at me. "Legal action is already in motion," she said. "You'll be hearing from our attorney soon." I nodded once. Good. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Again, "You really think you're in the right here?" she said. "I don't think," I replied. I checked. A pause. Short, but enough. Because I saw it again. That flicker. That moment where certainty cracked, just slightly. "You should have just left things alone," she said quietly. And that was the first honest thing she'd said. Because that's exactly what this was. They didn't want control. They wanted things to stay the same. Easy. Unchallenged. But that wasn't happening anymore. "I gave you a chance," she added. "Multiple times." I almost smiled. "No," I said. "You gave me pressure." Her jaw tightened. "Last chance," she said. "Remove the gate. Drop this, whatever this is, or you're going to regret it." I looked past her for a moment. Down the road. At the path they'd been using for years. Then back at her. "Too late for that," I said. Silence. No comeback this time. Just a long look, like she was trying to figure something out. Or maybe realizing something. Then she turned. Walked away without another word. No threats. No papers. Just gone. And somehow, that felt bigger than anything she'd said before. Because now, they knew. Or at least, they suspected. That I wasn't guessing anymore. That I had something. And whatever it wasn't going to help them. That night, I made one call. A lawyer. I kept it simple. Explained the situation. Told him what I had. There was a pause on the other end. Then a quiet chuckle. "Send me everything," he said. So I did. Documents. Survey results. Video clips. All of it. And his response? Short. Clear. Confident. "You're not the one in trouble here." I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. Because for the first time since this started, it wasn't just me thinking that. It was someone who knew the law. And that changed everything. Outside, another car passed down the road. Same as always. Same routine. But now, every second of it was being recorded. Every move documented. Every mistake saved. They thought they were building pressure. But they weren't. They were building a case. For me. And they didn't even realize it yet. The shift didn't happen overnight. But when it did, it was obvious. 2 days after I sent everything to the lawyer, I got the call. "I've reviewed your documents," he said. "And I'll be honest with you, this is worse than I expected." I frowned slightly. "Worse how?" "For them," he replied. That was the first time I actually smiled. "Walk me through it," I said. There was a brief pause, papers shuffling on his end. "You have clear title ownership," he began. "No recorded easement. No shared access agreement. And based on your survey, That road is entirely within your boundary. Yeah, I said. That's what I found too. Good, he replied. Because that's exactly what we're going to use. I leaned forward slightly. And the HOA? Another pause. Shorter this time. They have no legal authority over your property, he said plainly. None. Just like that. No hesitation. No gray area. So the fines? I asked. Meaningless, he said. At best, they're unenforceable. At worst. He trailed off for a second. At worst. I repeated. They're exposing themselves, he finished. That word stuck. Exposing. Keep talking, I said. They've issued fines without authority, made legal threats without standing, and, based on your footage, have repeatedly entered your property without permission. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Which means? I asked. Which means, he said, they've crossed from annoyance into liability. That was the moment everything clicked. All the pressure, all the confidence, all the threats. It wasn't strength. It was overreach. So what happens now? I asked. A slight shift in his tone. Now, he said. Now we respond. The letter went out the next morning. Not an email. Not a warning. A formal legal notice. Certified. Documented. Unignorable. I didn't deliver it myself. Didn't need to. But I knew exactly what it said. Because we wrote it together. It was direct. Precise. And very, very clear. It stated, I was the sole legal owner of the property and the road. There was no recorded easement or shared access. The HOA had no jurisdiction or authority over my land. All fines issued were invalid and must be withdrawn immediately. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. The part that mattered came next. A demand. Immediate cease and desist. No more use of the road. No more contact. No more notices. Effective immediately. And then, the final section, the one that changed everything. A notice of potential legal action. 4. Trespassing. Harassment. Fraudulent misrepresentation. With evidence attached. Video. Documents. Survey results. Everything. I didn't hear anything for the rest of that day. No cars. No letters. No visits. Nothing. And that silence? It felt different this time. Not controlled. Not planned. Shaken. The next morning, I saw the first sign. A car slowed down near the entrance. Not like before. Not confident. Cautious. The driver looked at the road. Then at the house. Then turned around. Didn't even try to pass through. I watched from the window, arms crossed. That had never happened before. Not once. Around noon, she showed up. But this time, no sunglasses. No clipboard. No confidence. Just tension. She stopped halfway up the driveway. Didn't come all the way to the porch. I stepped outside slowly. We stood there for a moment. No words. Then she held up a piece of paper. I assume this came from you, she said. I glanced at it. Recognized the header immediately. Yeah, I said. That's mine. Her jaw tightened slightly. You're making some serious accusations, she said. I shrugged lightly. Not accusations, I replied. Documentation. That hit harder than anything else I could have said. Because it was true. Everything in that letter. Proven. Recorded. Verified. You don't understand how this works, she said. But her voice wasn't as steady as before. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said. I think I do now. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she tried a different angle. This road has been used for years, she said. People depend on it. I nodded. I know, I said. And that was it. No argument. No pushback. Just acknowledgement. Because she was right. They did depend on it. Which meant what came next was going to hurt. You can't just shut it down overnight, she added. I looked at her for a moment. Then said the one thing she didn't want to hear. Watch me. That was the moment. The exact moment everything flipped. Because before, they thought they were in control. Now, they realized they weren't. She lowered the paper slowly. Looked down the road. Then back at me. And for the first time since this started, there was no confidence left. Just calculation. This isn't over, she said quietly. I gave a small nod. I know, but we both understood something now. It wasn't going to end the way she thought. She turned without another word. Walked back down the road. Slower this time. Like every step weighed more than before. I watched her go. Then turned back toward the house. The cameras were still running. The documents were still stacked on my desk. the gate still unfinished. But now, everything had changed, because this wasn't defense anymore. This was control. And for the first time since this started, it was mine. That evening, I picked up my tools again, walked back to the gate, and started working. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just action, because now, there was nothing left to figure out. They had made their move, and I had answered. The only thing left was to see what they did next. They didn't respond right away, and that told me everything, because before, they were fast, aggressive, constant, letters within days, visits without warning, fines stacking like clockwork. Now, nothing. 3 days went by without a single car using the road. Not one. The gravel sat untouched. No fresh tire tracks. No engines in the distance. It was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was tense, like everything was holding its breath, waiting. On the 4th day, the response came. Not from her, from their lawyer. A thick envelope. Official. Carefully worded. I opened it at the kitchen table. Slowly. Page 1. Exactly what I expected. They denied everything. Of course they did. Claimed. The road had been used as shared access for over a decade. There was an implied easement. The HOA had a right to enforce community access. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair. Because here's the thing about claims like that. They sound strong, until you look closer. I called my lawyer that afternoon. They're pushing implied easement, I said. A pause. Then, a quiet chuckle. Good, he said. I frowned slightly. Good. Very good. I sat up straighter. Explain. Implied easements are hard to prove, he said. Really hard. Especially when there's no documentation, no agreement, and a new owner who never consented. I nodded slowly. And the HOA? I asked. They're making it worse for themselves, he replied. Because now they're putting their argument on record. That word again. Record. Everything they said, everything they claimed. It was all being documented now. Which meant it could all be used against them. What's the next move? I asked. We escalate, he said. 2 days later. We did. Another letter went out. Stronger. Sharper. This one didn't just respond. It dismantled. Point by point. No recorded easement equals no legal right. Long-term use is not equal to ownership. HOA has zero jurisdiction over private property outside its boundary. And then, the pressure flipped completely. A formal notice of intent to file suit. Against the HOA. And individually, against her. For harassment, trespassing, abuse of authority, attempted fraudulent enforcement. With evidence attached. Again. But this time, organized, structured, impossible to ignore. That's when things broke. The very next morning, the road wasn't empty. But it wasn't normal either. 2 cars pulled up to the entrance. Stopped. Didn't come through. Just sat there. Like they were unsure. Like something had changed. And it had. By midday, I saw something I hadn't seen before. People arguing. Down near the entrance. 2 neighbors. Voices raised. Gestures sharp. I couldn't hear the words. But I didn't need to. Because I understood exactly what was happening. They were realizing it. The risk. The problem. The reality. This wasn't just about inconvenience anymore. This was legal. And if it went further, it wasn't just the HOA on the line. It was everyone involved. That evening, she came back. But not the same way. No confidence. No authority. Just urgency. She walked faster this time. Stopped closer than before. You filed something, she said immediately. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. Then, not yet, I said. Her expression tightened. But we will. That hit. Hard. You're taking this too far, she said. I almost laughed. Too far. I repeated. You fine me thousands of dollars on my own property. That's not. It's documented. I cut in. Everything is. Silence. She looked away for a second. Then back at me. This doesn't have to go to court, she said. And there it was. The shift. From threats to negotiation. I agree, I said. That surprised her. Again. You do? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, I said. It doesn't. A pause. Then let's resolve it, she said quickly. I took a step closer. Withdraw every fine, I said. Put it in writing that the HOA has no claim to this road. and tell everyone to stay off my property. Her face went still. That wasn't what she wanted. Not even close. That's not realistic, she said. I shrugged slightly. Court is. Another silence. Long. Heavy. Because now, she understood something. This wasn't pressure anymore. This was consequence. You're going to cause a lot of problems, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. Then I added. For the people who started it. That was it. No more arguing. No more threats. Because there was nothing left to say. She stepped back slowly. Looked down the road. The same road she had claimed. Controlled. Used against me. And now, it was slipping. Fast. This isn't over, she said one last time. But this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like hope. I watched her walk away again. But this time, I didn't feel tension. I didn't feel pressure. I felt something else. Momentum. Because the truth was out. The evidence was clear. And the control they thought they had. It was gone. All that was left now was the outcome. And I already knew how that was going to end. They didn't fight it. Not the way they said they would. Not the way they acted like they could. Because once everything was on record, once the evidence was laid out, once the legal pressure became real, the confidence disappeared. Fast. 3 days after her last visit, I got the call. From my lawyer. It's over, he said. Just like that. No build-up. No suspense. 2 words. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. What happened? I asked. They folded, he said. Completely. A pause. Then he continued. The HOA is withdrawing all fines. Every single one. I exhaled slowly. Good, I said. But he wasn't done. They're also issuing a formal statement, he added, confirming they have no authority over your property or the road. There it was. In writing. Official. Final. And her. I asked. Another pause. She's out, he said. Stepped down this morning. I didn't react right away. Not because I didn't care, but because that part didn't surprise me. People like her don't stay in power when things fall apart publicly. And this didn't just fall apart. It collapsed. Later that day, the documents came through. I printed them out, laid them across the same table where this whole thing had started. The same table where I'd stared at those first notices, trying to figure out what I'd missed. Now, there was no confusion, just clarity. The statement was short, direct. Oak Ridge Community HOA acknowledges that the road located on Parcel 17B is private property and not subject to HOA governance or shared access rights. All previously issued fines are hereby rescinded. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just fact. And honestly, that was enough. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to finish something. The gate. I stepped outside, tools in hand. The air was quiet again. Truly quiet. No distant engines. No tires on gravel. Just wind moving through the trees. I worked steadily. No rush. No interruptions. Post by post. Panel by panel. Until finally, it was done. I stepped back, wiping the dust from my hands. Looked at it for a long moment. Solid. Simple. Closed. And just like that, the road was no longer theirs to use. Around noon, I saw movement near the entrance. A car. It slowed down. Stopped. The driver looked at the gate. Then at the house. Waited for a moment. Then turned around. No argument. No attempt. Just left. I watched until the dust settled. Then turned back toward the property. And for the first time since all of this started, everything felt the way it was supposed to. Mine. Not contested. Not questioned. Just mine. A few days later, I ran into one of the neighbors in town. The same guy who had driven through without stopping that first week. He didn't have the same attitude this time. Didn't even look me in the eye at first. Didn't know it was all yours, he said quietly. I nodded once. Yeah, I replied. It is. A pause. Then he added. They should have checked. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. They should have. And that was it. No argument. No tension. Because there was nothing left to argue about. Word spread quickly after that. Not through announcements. Not through meetings. But the way things always spread in places like that. Quietly. From one conversation to another. Until everyone knew. The road? Closed. The fines? Gone. The authority they thought they had? Never existed. And me? I went back to exactly what I came here for in the first place. Peace. No more letters. No more threats. No more people treating my land like it was theirs. Just quiet mornings. Open space. And a gate that stayed exactly where I put it. Because in the end, this was never really about a road. It was about something simpler than that. Something people forget too easily. Just because something has been done for years doesn't make it right, doesn't make it legal, and it definitely doesn't make it yours. They learned that the hard way. And me? I made sure they never forgot it.